Hey there, listeners, and welcome to another episode of the Earth Station One podcast. That's right, folks. We are back, and we've got a great one tonight. This one, we are looking at Godzilla minus one. It's interesting because this is the first time we've actually had a movie review for one of the Japanese Godzilla movies. This is real interesting to do because we've done all the American-made ones since, King of Monsters all the way up through Kong versus Godzilla. And it's interesting to be able to talk about this one because this one took me by surprise. I did not even know this was coming. And, when I saw the trailer about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I said, oh, I'll probably go to see it. And then I heard everyone, the buzz starting to build with it. And I wrote Mike and I was just like, dude, we have to review this one. And he was like, he didn't even bat an eye. He went, okay.
I'm sorry. Go see a Godzilla movie in the theater. Oh, twist my arm.
I know. Exactly. Exactly. And we've got a great, great crew to talk all about it. Of course, Mr. Mike Gordon's here.
Howdy.
Welcome back, sir. You were missed last week.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I still haven't seen Napoleon yet, so I'm not quite sure if I'm going to now based on the reviews that you guys had last week, but I will check it out at some point. But yeah, I was sorry to miss it, but I had a good vacation at home, good Thanksgiving, so I appreciate the sentiments that I got that I was missed.
Oh, very much so. People were like going, where's Gordon? Where's the howdy? But so it was pretty cool though. And who didn't even leave since last week? Alan Porter's back.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say it only seems like a week since we were last together.
It feels just like yesterday to me, man. It really, really does. It's great to have you. Returning
Very much.
And of course, Drew Meyer's here.
Well, hi. How's it going? Thanks for having me.
Oh, dude.
I'm glad that you could fit this in, especially since this wasn't directed by David Cronenberg.
Mike is referring to the fact that for the month of November, I decided to watch all of Cronenberg's films, 22 films in chronological order. And
Brutal,
I got about 3/4 of the way through and had to take a break. It was getting to the point where I was watching a Cronenberg, then watching a Paddington movie, then watching a Cronenberg, then a Paddington movie. And then I just had to stop. So this was an excellent break from that watch. And I'm looking forward to talking with you, gentlemen.
Oh, it's going to be great. I'm glad you're here. And returning once again, Mark Holmes is here. Welcome, sir.
Konnichiwa.
It is awesome. We're talking Godzilla. It's either you or Maddox showing up for these movies. And it was great when you said, I know you're reviewing Godzilla. Can I be in on it? You were like literally the first one who jumped in. So it's always great to have you, sir.
Thanks for having me. I always have to make your own luck, you say. So I reached out to Mike and he was nice enough to accept.
Absolutely.
Of course, of course. And of course, at home, if you haven't seen the movie yet, and it's not in widespread, it's not at every single movie theater. It's close for a Japanese release. It's very widespread. But compared to something like the Marvels or Napoleon or some of the other new stuff that's coming out that's American release, it's, on every corner almost. But Godzilla, you had to travel a little bit. We are going to spoil the hell out of this one. Okay, so you have been warned. Mr. Mike, ready to take away, sir?
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about the box office. There's not a lot to talk about. I mean, it did okay. Its opening weekend, it grossed like about 11 or 12 million dollars, which wasn't terrible. It was third this week, but that just goes to show you how terrible the box office has been overall for folks. But I mean, it did make some ground, some headway, and some history, because it's the largest box office opening for any live action Japanese film in North America. So that in and of itself is pretty significant. And also it's actually, I believe, the largest opening for a foreign film this year in the United States. So that's pretty significant. It did have a lot going against it because it is Japanese with subtitles. So for whatever reason, a lot of people like stay away from that kind of thing, and so it's a hard sell. And as Mike pointed out, it wasn't available on every single cinema that you could go to, despite the fact that they have multi screens. And I think another thing that hurt it too, at least I was disappointed, is the fact that because it's a smaller release, all the big movies, Beyonce, et cetera, are taking all of the Dolby theaters, are taking all the IMAX theaters. So Godzilla Minus One, even though it was shot for IMAX, it was not available for a lot of people to watch in that format, which was very disappointing. So I know that I saw it in a pretty much a regular screen, not enhanced in any way, and yet there were many times, I mean, we'll go into it, but there were many times where I didn't feel like it was that diminished, because I was like, wow, both visually and audio wise. We've talked about it before. The box office this year has been really wonky. It's been crazy, and I think there's not. I'm looking at the pluses on this one, despite the fact that it's a -1. I'm looking at the pluses on this release instead of the minuses, as far as the fact that it didn't do huge numbers, especially when you compare it to the Legendary Pictures releases for Godzilla movies over the last was it almost 10 years, right? Because that first one came out in 2014. So goodness gracious. It doesn't, it does half that, which is kind of unfortunate, but as we'll get into it, I think a lot of us will agree that this one is not one to miss. This one is this one should be seen by more people, and I hope that that's the case. I hope the word of mouth is, and we can help that out by spreading the word. So, that said, let's get into it and talk about. First of all, I know Mark, you've been on the show before, and we've talked about Godzilla and Godzilla movies and everything. But real briefly, what's your history with the big green guy, and what were you expecting about this movie?
Oh, my history is it's probably going to be pretty similar to everybody else. I actually grew up watching Godzilla movies and Ultraman and all the giant Japanese monster movies. We had a show with a local horror host who would show the Godzilla movies on Saturday mornings. So I was pretty much of an introvert when I was younger, so I'd stay home and watch the horror movies on Saturday mornings. And Godzilla was a big part of it. The one that I remember the most as a child was Godzilla versus the Sea Monster, because I believe it snuck into the public domain somehow, and the local UHF stations would just run it again and again and again. So I have a very vivid memory of that one. As I got older and I got married and had children, I wanted to get my son into it, but it just didn't click with him. So the first Toho movie I ever saw, Godzilla one, was Godzilla 2000. And we saw that in the theater, and I liked it, but my son wasn't very impressed with it. So he goes his own direction. So when I heard that Godzilla -1 was going to be in a theater, I had to see that one. I had missed Shin Godzilla somehow. It came and went in my area very quickly. So Shin Godzilla slipped right by me, but I did catch that movie.
Yeah, that one was very much, that one came out, that was the last Toho release, I believe, at least theatrically. And when it hit this country, I don't know how many screens it was. It wasn't very huge. And I don't even think I think it made less than $5 million really total in North America, which was very, very small. But that one was one that once it was released and available, I think it was on Netflix, but streaming anyway, word of mouth got out pretty quickly on that one. Drew, what about you? What's your history with the King of Monsters?
As a small child, I owned the Shogun Warriors Godzilla toy. That you could hit the button on its back.
He's right up there on that shelf.
Yep, with the tongue and the fists launching off. Godzilla is one of those where before I would watch it on TV on reruns. As soon as we got a VHS player, I would rent the movies. In fact, the very first VHS we ever rented was Godzilla 1984. So as a 7-year-old, that was one of those things really early on. I think it had the Godzilla versus Bambi trailer right there at the beginning. I have 2 younger brothers one is 12 years younger than me. The other is 20 years younger than me. And as they came to a certain age, those were the films that we used to watch together. So we've watched pretty much all of the original series. Once they came into the later 2000s, I kind of fell off for a while. Shin Godzilla came out. Watched it twice in the theaters. I think it's a masterpiece. I will probably talk about that a little bit in comparison, especially tonally, because it came out in 2016 and then basically got a gag order while Legendary were the ones releasing the films. So yeah, as soon as this was announced that it was going to be coming out, it piqued my interest. And as soon as I found out I could see it in a theater, I went. I like you said, very bummed I missed it on IMAX. A couple of friends of mine who have gotten a chance to see it in some bigger cities, they said it's really astounding. But I feel like the impact of this movie is less about the sound and the visuals and more about the story, which I'm sure we'll get into in just a moment. So it's not that big of a loss. And if I can find it on IMAX, I will go see it sometime soon.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to rewatch it if it gets a bigger release here. That's for sure. Alan, what about you?
I am the newbie to the party. Culturally, Godzilla is not that big a thing in the UK. Did not grow up with it. Not part of my childhood at all. Obviously knew who Godzilla was, it just sort of seeps through the cultural zeitgeist, but it was not a big thing on TV like it was here. Of course, most of my friends over here.
I think he needs to target London now.
Yeah. But of course, most of my friends over here, having moved to the States 20 odd years ago, most of my friends here around the same age like you guys, they all grew up on it. So it's Godzilla, Godzilla, Godzilla. Can't go out for a drink without somebody talking about Godzilla sort of thing. But I actually didn't really watch a single Godzilla film until I was on a flight to Tokyo in 2014. And Godzilla was actually on the in-flight entertainment. And I thought, well, I'm going to Tokyo. I might as well watch a Godzilla movie. But of course, in that movie, he attacked San Francisco, not Tokyo. So it was all over. And I will say I was completely unimpressed. And then I was invited to a press screening of Shin Godzilla. And I absolutely adored it. I thought it was a brilliant piece of filmmaking. And having just a couple of years ago been in Japan, just the view it gave of Japanese culture, the way the Japanese government worked, why things happened the way they did and stuff, I thought was absolutely brilliant. And there wasn't a lot of the actual big lizard in it. It was more about people's reaction to it, which I thought was really clever and really loved it. Watched Godzilla versus Kong because I got co-opted onto a panel at a convention where we were going to talk about it. So I had to go watch it before I did the convention. That pretty much was the sum of my Godzilla history up until this week. Like Mike said, I saw a couple of the trailers sort of, 3-4 weeks ago and thought, oh, this looks good. And then I started hearing the buzz, and particularly the buzz about, as Drew was just mentioning it, the story, how human this story is. It's got, it's a very human story that just happens to have a big lizard in it. And what I was seeing in the trailers looked very cool. So I thought, yeah, I'll go see it. So I want to see it this weekend. And I tell you, I never expected the 2 best movies I saw this year, that one would be about a doll and the other one would be about a big lizard. But it totally blew me away. I was very impressed with it. So
absolutely, Mike.
So yeah, I coming at it with a very sort of fresh perspective. I do not have the history or anything.
That's very cool. That's very cool. So you've never seen the original 1954?
I've obviously seen clips and stuff on YouTube of men in rubber suits and stuff like that, but I have never sat down and watched any of the original Japanese Godzilla movies. I'm thinking back, as actually just before we got on the air, I was thinking back. I think I've seen like the 1998 one. Was it Ronald Emmerich?
Yeah.
I think
you're mistaken. There may not actually have been a 1998 Godzilla movie. That couldn't possibly have existed. I think you're probably thinking of something with Jurassic Park.
No, I think that's about the last time that's going to be mentioned
Highlander
on the
2,
show.
It doesn't exist. Okay, all right. I'll
exactly.
Okay.
That's the last time that one will be mentioned on this show.
Okay.
But Mike, I know that we've talked about Godzilla a lot. A quick recap about what your thoughts were going into this one.
Oh, well, everyone knows, like Drew and Mark and such, I grew up on Godzilla. It was the Saturday afternoon movies on Channel 20 growing up. It was, going to see Ultraman on, TV after school, Johnny Sacco and Giant Robot, Shogun Warriors, and Godzilla was always floating around those, even though he was not in the TV shows. But it was always interesting. The first movie that I actually got to see Godzilla in the theaters was the movie that shall not be named and forgotten forever, all time. But then, having a young son, born in 99, he was the perfect age for watching Godzilla movies. And, as William grew up, we religiously watched all the different Godzillas, even Final Wars. And, it went where, that was just awesome. It was all the monsters and everything. And, it was just great being able to watch it together. And then, 10 years ago when they came out with the new Godzilla, King of Monsters, and we've talked about it multiple times, all the different movies. But we've also talked about Godzilla, the Japanese versions, and, all the different watchings we've done at conventions or at home. And they're always just fun because they're fun movies to watch. And then I saw the trailer for this one, and I was like, oh, this one felt very similar to Shin, very, very much from the trailers and what it looked like and everything. And I was like, oh, this looks awesome. And then what had me, we'll get into it, of course, but the look of the monster and everything was just like, wow, I've got to go see this one. And it won me over with that. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, similar story here. I grew up with Godzilla movies on Saturday afternoon, creature double features. But most of those were the 70s Toho movies that were dubbed, and where Godzilla was pretty cartoony. Like, I mean, it was cool, but like he was fighting like other monsters, big monsters, and it was just, it was a lot of fun. I do remember at some point seeing the 1956 American version of his debut with Raymond Burr. And I thought that was pretty cool and everything. I don't think I'd seen the original 1954 Godzilla movie, the Japanese version. I don't think I'd seen that until we went to record our episode spotlighting Godzilla for one of our Countdown to Halloween episodes. I think it was 2014 where we did that as well. And I purposefully watched the original Japanese version, and I was blown away. I hadn't realized that was something else entirely. That was not cartoony. And it was really, really significant, and really was not just a monster movie, but like all really, really good monster movies, it was a parable for a lot of things that were happening in Japan at the time. And it was really something I think that was closely associated with Japan. So I didn't understand that until I watched that one. And as much as I've enjoyed some of the legendary films over the years, 10 years, I guess it's been, my goodness. I've looked out for the Toho releases. I think Criterion did a really good job at re-releasing those in a nice, great package that you can watch them with subtitles instead of dubs. So I think that helps a lot. If anything else, it helps you take them more seriously, I think, in some ways. I'm not really that I haven't watched all the Toho ones that were done like in later, like in the 90s and the 2000s and all of that. So those are a big blank spot for me as far as the Godzilla franchise. But I did see Shin Godzilla. I think largely because, Mike, you were talking about it at the time and you had seen it and you were like, this is awesome. So I watched it. I enjoyed it a lot. I didn't love it. I appreciated the take that they had on it. I thought it was really interesting. but I didn't like love it. Especially, I wasn't really too excited about the creature design, especially in the beginning. But I was all like, this is the first time I've seen a Toho Godzilla movie in the theater, so that alone was enough for me to go, yes, please. Also, I don't think it's a coincidence that this is coming out at the same time that the Monarch series on Apple Plus is out. They just released a Godzilla and Kong trailer that's coming out next year. So even though they're kind of, they're doing their own thing, there's this sort of connection between what Toho's doing and what Legendary's doing. I think they're sort of playing off each other. As I think Drew pointed out, Toho's not allowed to come out with a Godzilla movie whenever Legendary does. So they're kind of limited in what they can do. So I don't know when we'll get the next one, but I'm glad we got this one. So this was a great experience. I think this to me now ranks as one of the it's the second best Godzilla movie to me, apart from the original 1954 one, and I'd say it ranks up there among the best movies I've seen this year. This is really, really special. And let's talk a little bit more about how special it is and why it's so special. Drew, we're going to start with you this round. How did Godzilla -1 reach you, man? What do you think of it as a whole?
Mike, if you had told me a week ago that I was going to cry in a Godzilla film, I would have said it's possible. Unlikely, but possible. Yeah, so we're talking about the trailer for this film. The trailer for Godzilla -1 does not discuss the plot. It is all monster. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people are going to stay away from is they think, the advertisements, people just want to see this monster. When this movie wins awards, and it will win awards, it's going to win awards because of the human element. The part that, let's face it, is usually the weakest when it comes to Godzilla movies. When we were all children, Alan aside, when we were all children watching those movies, I'm pretty sure none of us were watching it for the human interaction, unless it was those little twins singing for Mothra. We want to see the guy in the rubber suit smashing the models. And admittedly, that's what I thought I wanted out of this film. I would have been happy watching this movie even without Godzilla in it. And that is the biggest compliment I can make because It was that good. And then you gave me a big atomic lizard and that just made it better. I will say that I'm going to watch this again, probably relatively soon. At the moment, Shin Godzilla stands as my favorite of the Godzilla, and then probably this one, then the original 1954, one that I came into late in life. Didn't realize what the big deal was when everyone would talk about how great of a film it was until Criterion released a Blu-ray of it. And I'm like, have I actually watched this movie? And I watched it like, where's Raymond Burr? Ah, yes. Yeah, I came out of the theater and immediately started recording notes. I think I recorded like about 10 minutes worth of notes just on the ride back, which admittedly is a bit dangerous in the car. I probably shouldn't have done that. But I needed to get those thoughts down because I knew that there wasn't going to be anyone in my life that was going to be discussing this with me immediately until this podcast.
You don't have to worry about it. Nobody watches us or listens to us anyway, so they won't know.
So yeah, I thought it was exceptional. I'm really looking forward to discussing characters with you. Imagery, themes, narrative flow, all the things that I would never have expected to want to discuss in a Godzilla film. And again, like if you told me the Godzilla is the weakest part of the Godzilla movie, I never would have believed it. And I'm not saying it's weak. I'm just saying it is the weakest part. But I'm going to let somebody else rant for a second, and you can come back to me with those.
Absolutely. And we'll definitely see how much we can get through all of that in the limited time that we have to talk about it here. But Mark, what about you? What are your overall feelings about Godzilla -1? Where does it rank for you?
Oh, it ranks right up there at the top. I'm a sucker for the cheesy Godzilla movies. Those are the ones that I grew up on. And then I'm a sucker for the 90s era Godzilla movies because they were right over the top. Some of those 90s movies are just bonkers. But I'm also a romantic at heart. And similar to what Drew said, I did get a little misty-eyed more than once in the entire movie. When I got home from the movie, I went to my wife and I said, "You would have been crying your eyes out if you watched this movie with me." And she said, "Well, it's probably a good thing I didn't go then." So, I am a romantic at heart, and this is a love story that I have never seen before. The couple that wind up together, it just blew me away. It's just so innocent, the way that they just found each other in all this devastation of Japan. To catch people up, the movie starts at the end of World War II, and it's almost a post-apocalyptic movie when it comes to Japan, because the entire country was just devastated from the American bombings. A lot of people don't know that during World War II, the Air Force was firebombing Japan, and more Japanese died in the fire bombings of Tokyo than did during the 2 atomic bomb attacks. So it was going to happen sooner or later that the Japanese would have surrendered, but the atomic bombings actually just sped that up a little bit. But to look at the devastation from the newsreels of the day, and then they recreate it in this movie at the personal level. You see a soldier come home from war, and there's nothing to come home to. His neighbor from across the street comes across the street, and instead of welcoming him, thank God you're alive, she's actually upset with him because he didn't fight harder.
Right.
She had a personal loss. Everybody in the movie lost somebody in the war.
Well, she was also mad at him because he was supposed to be a kamikaze.
Correct.
But he knew that.
Correct. He was supposed to go out and die. He wasn't supposed to go out and fight. He was supposed to just go out there and die. That happened in the opening minutes of the movie when he lands his plane at the air base, and there is a bomb on the bottom of his plane. And I'm a bit of a history buff, and I said, I know exactly what this guy is. I know exactly what he didn't do, and I know what's going to happen to him. I realized that he was a kamikaze pilot that lost his nerve and could not go through with it. And I said, okay, they're setting him up as a coward in the beginning of the movie. But as we get to know this young man, he's not a coward. He's just somebody who did not want to die. And I said, that is the most human response you could ever. I can't even imagine climbing into a plane with the intention of deliberately crashing it into a enemy ship. It just not something that a normal person would think about. And the kamikazes went out in the thousands and did that. It was a really, really strange time of the war. And but as they're seeing, as they get notes from home, all of Japan is being destroyed from the air. And it's really like, I'm getting a little choked up just talking about it. It was really and they brought that home to the human level. And as was mentioned, you could make this movie without the dinosaur and it would be almost as powerful.
Yeah. To me, it's like this movie and the very first Godzilla movie. And I think there's some others that it's probably a lot more subtle, but this is really hits home where the sort of, when I think Godzilla is much more like powerfully effective when he's depicted as not just a random monster, but as a sort of like godlike figure, like and for people that are dealing with a lot of issues. So I thought that's what made this take on him really, really much more powerful than some of the others that I've seen. Alan, what about you? How did you feel about the whole thing?
Yeah, I was the same. There was actually parts of the movie when I was like, oh, don't bring Godzilla on at the moment. I can see, because I was so invested in the human story. It was actually interesting because when I got home, my wife, Jill, said to me, so she said, well, what was the movie about? I'm like, well, first off, it was not a monster movie. I think them actually marketing it as a monster movie has done themselves a disservice, because I think people will not go to see it because they think it's a monster movie. And it's far more than that. Though I will say, when I went, the movie theater was full. I actually had people sat next to me,
Nice.
which is complete opposite to my recent experience at the Marvels and Napoleon when the places were empty. So the movie theater was full. So I think, so actually, I actually said to Jill, hang on, just let me write down a quick list of what I think this movie was about. And I actually came up with 10 things, a bit like Drew in the car. I was thinking about it. So can I go down that list?
Absolutely.
So I think this movie was about survivor's guilt.
Yes.
PTSD.
Big time.
PTSD, redemption, family is what you make of it, friendship, loyalty, reconstruction. Mark's right. I mean, the stuff about the devastation in Tokyo was amazing. The will of people over the stagnation of government, innovation, horrors of unnecessary war, cultural change, and then I put in brackets, oh, and it had a big lizard in it too. That movie was just about something. I actually we had a Japanese exchange student live with us for a while, and she's still sort of semi part of the family. She still calls us mum and dad, even though she's been back in Tokyo for a long time now. And we still see her whenever I've been in Japan. But it's interesting because when her and her family talk about the war, their view on it is very different than ours and the ones that my kids got through their education. And they do talk a lot about the devastation and stuff. And I've heard them talk about it. But to see it on screen, to Mark's point, was incredibly emotional. And to see that family, who aren't related, but just come together and grow, and the friendship of the four guys on the boat, on the Minesweeper as well, was just such a core to that movie. Yeah, there was times, one particular scene in thing when I was, gasping, oh no, almost in tears. Yeah. But having said all that, when I said, oh, and it's got a big lizard in it, Godzilla was brilliant. As the creature, the way the creature was actually represented, the way it moved, the looks, it didn't look like a CGI monster like it does in all the legendary ones. I'm not looking at that going, that's good CGI. I'm looking at that thinking that is an actual organic being that I'm watching. It was so well done.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I could, yeah, I'm going to show
May
it.
I jump in just sorry, Alan. May I jump in?
Yeah.
There's 2 points that I think we've danced around here, but need to be mentioned. First, this is essentially the 70th anniversary of Godzilla. Yes. Technically, it'll be next year, but this film, for those who like Doctor Who, when we do our 50th anniversaries of Doctor Who or 60th anniversaries, there's a lot of odes to the past. In this Godzilla, they are doing all the eras of Godzilla in one form or another. So rather than a big CGI monster, this is animated to look like an organic man and a guy in a suit, right? There's references to the Showa era, the Heisei era, all the eras of Godzilla, even though those are eras that are chronologically take place in the future from what this story is taking place. And the other thing that is mind-blowing to me is when I looked up what the budget of this film is. Now, Mike, you had said this film only made about $11.2 million in the United States. Guess what? It made its money back because it cost $15 million to make this film.
Yeah.
This is essentially, for that price, an independent film. And so any money they make is probably going to be incredibly profitable. So the fact that we get this kind of quality, this should, to anyone who likes these kind of films, tell you why a well-written script is important and why character is important and why the legendary films, while they are spectacle, are never going to be great films. They're going to be enjoyable films, but they'll never be on this level.
Talking of the budget, I heard something on one of the YouTube videos I watched, and I don't know if it's about the amount of time it took to make this one, and that the reason the budget is low is they actually gave the animators and the effects team time to do the details and get it right, as opposed to throwing money at them and say, we need a CGI monster in 6 months. It's like, we've only got this amount of budget, but you've got 2 years.
Right.
So, they could work at it at a lower cost, but actually get much better effects because they weren't pushing them, they were giving them time to hone their craft. And I thought that came, I don't know if that's accurate, but they look like that to me on the screen.
I also want to point out too, I mentioned the box office, and that I was talking just about the North American box office. When this debuted in Japan, I think the first weekend of October, and it was instantly number one at the Japanese box office. It grossed, I think, 7.8 million, roughly, if you convert the yen. And it's done, significantly well in Japan. So I don't want to make it sound like it's only made like, $12 million or whatever, because it's actually made quite a bit more than that if you add in the Japanese and the worldwide numbers as well. So
I don't want to slag down American movies, because I do enjoy American movies, but you
Sure.
wonder where the money goes sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, you double this movie's budget, triple it, quadruple it, and you're barely getting to the catering budget of an American movie.
That's true.
Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent these past couple of years on big budget movies that have just completely not connected with the audience for whatever reason. And here we have what looks like a huge budget movie for $15 million.
Mm-hmm.
I remember a few years back when we did the Space Battleship Yamato special.
Yeah.
I looked up that live action movie, and that was $18 million. And that movie took place entirely out in space. There was no just going outside and filming. I mean, everything was a set. And I just baffles me where the money goes on American productions.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them goes to, a lot of it goes to, I'm not coming down on actors or whatever, but, and talent like that. But this budget there's a lot of, there's a lot of actors and directors and writers in Hollywood that they wouldn't even meet this budget, right? Like they would want more than this, but this entire budget, right? So, and this, this movie, despite the fact that it doesn't have any big names in it, international names, all the actors are believable. All the actors are really, well received. I think there wasn't any time where I thought, oh man, I'm not buying this. They did such a great job. Mike, what's something else about the movie or overall, how you feel about it?
Well, like everyone else was saying, I loved, and I did mean loved, I love the human interaction, not just between the fighter pilot and the woman he met with the daughter, well, that became their daughter, I should say. And it was interesting, but I love the interaction between him and the boat crew.
Mm-hmm.
That was, they were what he needed. That was to help him build his confidence back. He had a purpose in life. And that was the wonderful thing about it. And I loved it. I really, really loved it. And I thought that was just great. And the human element was just wonderful. And when you saw the ineptness of the government, that they didn't want to get involved to help stop Godzilla, it had to be a civilian crew to do it. And it was just awesome to see. And I like how they played into the geopolitical. And it was, we can't, Japan didn't want to get involved and the US didn't want to get involved because of Russia and, everything, because it was just the beginning of the Cold War. And it was
very real thing.
Yeah. Oh, very much so. And I just thought, the scenes were so amazing in this movie. The wrecks of the ships and the battleships. And then to see Godzilla lock and load was just awesome. Literally the fins coming up, and as they were lighting up, they were raising and everything. That was just so well done. And then the power of his blast was just like beyond belief.
Yeah, that was the first time that went off. The first time Godzilla went atomic. Like I said, I was not in a Dolby theater. I was not in an IMAX theater, but I went back in my seat and I was like, wow, That was just, I mean, they depicted it so well that it was just a powerful moment. And also, I agree with you about, and you're not the only one that's today has mentioned the boat crew. The writer and director of this movie, Takashi Yamazaki, I believe is the pronunciation. I hope I'm doing that justice. He has stated in one of his influences to make this movie was Jaws, and yeah, you could definitely tell with the rapport with the boat crew that was right there. I mean, we didn't get a scene of them comparing scars or anything, but it was that camaraderie was there and that feeling was there. But I also appreciate the fact that you guys have talked about the human element, which I'm all on board with, but I do have to say, like, equal to that is the Godzilla moments, and I really appreciate the fact that the director didn't want to, because we've seen it so many times, especially when they try to reinvent him or whatever. It's like, ooh, let's build up to see Godzilla. Let's like see a little bit of him here, a little bit of him here, and we won't get to see the full like beast until like the third act. And we all know Godzilla at this point. Like, as you pointed out, it's like he's reaching his 70th anniversary. It's like, yeah, we know what Godzilla looks like. We don't know what this version is going to look like, but we know what Godzilla's look like. You don't need to like pull the whole Jaws thing on us, like, and show us just little bits at a time. And they didn't. Like, I mean, when that first sequence where we see him on the island, a very young teenage Godzilla, pre-atomic, right? I mean, he's brutal. They show all of him. It's just fantastic right there. And then, I mean, he's imposing then. Now, I don't know if the kamikaze pilot would have had any shot, even if he had got to his plane and actually pulled the trigger. I don't suspect that he would have had any effect on Godzilla even at that point, but still, because he was that imposing. But then, once he goes atomic, the next time we see Godzilla, man, that is something else entirely. The sequences are just phenomenal of him, destroying the cities. We've seen it 100 times by now, but yet this made it feel just as fresh, and it had consequences. I mean, we see the damage and we see the people reacting to the damage. And I think it was much more effective in this telling than it has been in the past. And, I mean, I hate to see him go, but man, the ending of how they defeated Godzilla, I think, was really interesting, especially since, this is a de-weaponized Japan. So they have to come up with unique ways of defeating this thing, and I thought it was pretty clever. And I mean, ultimately, it was a bomb in a plane that did it to him. But of course, as we see at the right before the credits start, he's not quite done yet. So, Alan, what else about the movie? Something else about the movie that you appreciated?
Well, actually, I'm just going to pick because as you guys know, I'm actually also an aviation geek.
Absolutely.
So I love the plane at the end.
That's a real plane, right? It
is an actual plane, yeah. Hang on a minute. I just like grab my notes here. So it was the J7W Shinden fighter. They mentioned in the movie that they only two made it into combat. It's not actually accurate. They only built two, which never saw combat. So there was two prototypes.
Gotcha.
Which were there at the end of the war. One was scrapped. The other one was repatriated by the U.S. Navy, and is actually at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, that was an actual plane. I geeked out when I saw that because it's like, I know what that plane is. That's awesome. So the only thing is, and this may have been a translation thing in the subtitles, the fighter pilot kept talking about jet planes. The Japanese did not have jet planes at that point in history. It's too early. And they correctly showed that was actually propeller driven aircraft, so that was fine. Again, just my aviation geek, but I must admit that the third act, when they're building up to the big potential sacrifice to fly the plane into Godzilla's mouth. Spoiler alert. I was like, they've taken one fuel tank out of this plane to put the bomb in. There's no way that plane's going to be flying around for that amount of time, just circling with only half a fuel tank. But that was the only time in the movie that anything threw me out of the movie. Was I just had this thing at the back of my mind, that plane cannot stay up in the air that long on half a fuel tank, just circling around waiting for his moment. But other than that, yeah, I mean, I love that as an merchant marine sailor guy who's served on board ships as well. I love the whole stuff with the boats and the Navy guys. That was awesome too. And as you said, just the way they came together and that camaraderie. I mean, I didn't know any of the actors, but they were all brilliant. I think there was just something about that family, and by family, I don't just mean the three of them, but as we said, also the guys on the boat, the neighbor across the street, the way they all sort of grew together. And then the mechanic and his guys as well. It was just like a nuclear family, coin a phrase, sort of grew and grew and grew, and he gradually pulled in more and more people that you cared about, and it really was about caring about the people. So yeah, I don't really have a bad word to say about this movie other than that one little technical gaffe with the plane. So,
and the cast had great chemistry together.
Yeah, they did.
I was literally just thinking that.
Yeah.
I really was just
all those interactions were totally believable.
Drew, what's something else? You got anything else in your notes there?
I have so many. Let's see. Let's talk a little bit about just some favorite scenes. Anything with Godzilla is great. But in particular, Mike, you mentioned that in this situation, Godzilla is multi-representative. It's an allegory to a number of things, right? So, the original Godzilla 1954 is only 9 years after Hiroshima. I mean, think about that. 9 years after that kind of devastation, and they're making a movie trying to parse out a country's trauma. And in many ways, it still has the same allegory in this, but it's also, I think, a representative of the horrors of war because it's always going to follow you. And in many ways, I was thinking, all right, so Kiyoshi, who's our kind of quote unquote coward / hero / redemption arc, 10 minutes in the movie, you know how the movie's going to end. I mean, it's like you have a fighter pilot who is too afraid or wants to live and won't kill themselves. You know how that story has to end. But the idea that he gets up in the air, he finally gets in the plane, and as he's on his way, he's flying over this beautiful green pastoral fields of Japan, and the music fades, it lowers, and nothing is said. The engines, all you can see is the engines, but you can just see him looking at the beauty that is his country. And the camera is from his point of view. So it's looking down across the field. And then the camera moves to the point of view to the front of the plane. And you just see Godzilla walking across the green fields. And everywhere Godzilla walks, there's destruction and fire and damage. This is always going to be a part of it. And there's only one way for him to, get it out of his life. And I thought that's really good storytelling, because if you can present that to us, and it's not so heavy-handed, and you can do so in so little words. And the other scene that I think is maybe not as obvious as a showcase piece is we talk about this is a volunteer army, right? So the government's not going to be a help, and it's basically anyone who wants to do it. But everyone who comes to the meeting for the volunteers, they're all ex-military. They're all ex-military who have found themselves adrift after the war. They are all suffering from PTSD. They're all suffering trying to get their families together. They're all suffering from injuries. So many of them are limping, or so many of them are in bandages. And the idea that they have to go back, but this time, unlike the first time where there are, the rich, the politicians, they're making them go to war and they're going to see no benefit. They actually can do good, and they're doing it to save their families. And there's a scene where you're thinking Kiyoshi's going to be the guy who stands up and rallies the troops together. And he doesn't. Once again, he is unable to speak, and he just sits there. We're looking at this massive crowd scene, and he's in the bottom left-hand corner with his arms crossed, scowling, while people who we've never seen before are standing up and talking about the price they have to pay and why they will or won't join. And it's a very powerful scene. And I think it's a really intelligent one, because at that point in time, we don't have our point of view hero character leading everything. This is really about found family and standing up. And this is about a generational trauma, if you will, post-war. I think both of those are really excellent. And Mike, you mentioned that Godzilla is not only allegory, but also a god. And it's true. Those scenes in the water with the boat is something that we've never seen in a Godzilla film before. I know Godzilla versus Kong, there's the aircraft carrier fight. It's not the same. It's not even designed to be the same. And yes, it does invoke Jaws, but at the same time, it invokes the awe of what Godzilla actually is. At no point in time do you think this is a man in a rubber suit. This is the legitimate, both supernatural, natural power that is beyond anything. And the fact that it is accepted by the people as being something natural, but above them as well, it was really well done. So yeah. And then, sorry, last last scene. The very final scene where their neighbor, who is, let's see, it's not Noriko, Sumiko. So Sumiko meets him when the boat docks and is hitting him because she's got the telegram. Yeah. And she's just holding the telegram and pounding his chest like, you're such an idiot. You never checked. All of this could have been avoided. You would have risked it all. That's, I think, probably the time I lost it the most. So,
yeah, it's an interesting ending because it sets it up that Noriko has quote unquote died in the attack, in the Godzilla attack, and then Shikishima is going to, fulfill his kamikaze destiny, right? But the movie dials back on both of those. It doesn't give us both of those deaths, right? It dials back at the end where the pilot it does escape, and quite in a great, I was touched. The thing that touched me was the fact that his old captain, that one captain who has every reason to want him dead, is the one who made sure that plane had an ejector seat for him, and wanted him to live. That touched me a lot. And then we find out that Noriko's alive too. So you've got this like happy ending, whereas I didn't expect that. I thought, with the way that this movie was playing out things, that it would be kind of a honorable ending for the main characters, but it would be an ending. It didn't, even though they dialed back on both of those, I didn't feel like it felt contrived. I felt like it was earned, and I was glad for it, because I was glad to see them when they're reunited in the hospital. It was really touching, and it got really dusty in the theater, really dusty. All right, Mike, Mark, any last comments from you on the movie?
Yeah, I was actually very surprised on how anti-government the movie was presented. They had to wave a wand to get the Americans out of the picture, because in reality, Japan was occupied by the American military. So if a giant monster did land on the beach, there would have been an American military response to it. However, brilliantly, they just ramped up the Cold War, and they said the Americans had to face down the Soviets, and they couldn't spare any men or materials to fight what they called a Japanese problem. Yeah. But the part that shocked me was the Japanese government just collapsed. It just said, we can't deal with it, and we're not going to. So that's when the ordinary citizens got together. One of the boat crew, Doc, he meets up with a veteran Navy captain, and they, like was mentioned earlier, regular citizens, all veterans, were called to a meeting. And when they were presented with what is basically a suicide mission, some of them just got up and left. Mm-hmm. I have a wife, I have a family to take care of. I've already done my duty. And the one, like was mentioned earlier, our hero is just sitting in the corner. And a regular guy gets up and says, "You're telling me the government isn't going to be involved?" And they said, "Yes." And he says, "Oh, so we stand a better chance of surviving now." Now, if that's not a stab at the war government and the post-war government of Japan, I don't know what is. So
there was tons of stabs at the Japanese government throughout this.
And we've really only glanced on Shin Godzilla, which came out just a few years earlier. That movie was made in response to the tsunami and the nuclear power station that was flooded,
right,
and had a radiation leak, and public was upset with the government response to that disaster. So they just made that Shin Godzilla movie and ramped that up to 11 on how the entire Japanese government was wiped out, and all these minor functionaries had to move up into higher positions and actually got the job done. So they were saying the people that we elect can't handle it, and it takes other people to come up and take care of it. So that was 2 Godzilla movies in a row, very critical of the modern government and the past government, which that took some guts. I mean, for a filmmaker, that took some guts.
Yeah, absolutely. Alan, any last words from you on the movie?
I was just going to say, we just talked, Drew and Mike really just touched on it, but for me, one of the underlying things, it was that cultural shift. There was that line in there about, I mean, they went into detail about, why things didn't work in the war, that the ships weren't well armored, planes didn't have ejector seats, basically people were sent out to die. And then there was the line in the movie about, war is no longer about sacrifice. We're going to war about our future. And for me, that underlined a huge cultural shift in Japanese thinking, which was happening around that time, about, start looking for the future. We're not doing things just because of tradition, or we've been told to, or it's about sacrifice. War is no longer about sacrifice. War is about, making sure that we have a future. And as you said, the whole thing of, Godzilla was very much an analogy for, war and the fear of atomic war in particular, and the inevitability of the damage and stuff that comes with war. So there was that, but also being a Godzilla newbie, the first time he used his atomic breath, boy, that blew me away, almost literally. And that scene was heart-wrenching when you actually saw the human cost of that as well. It was spectacular, but it was also heart-wrenching. So yeah, this was just a brilliant movie all around.
Yeah. Any final words on the movie from you, Mike? I mean, for now anyway.
Yeah, go see it, folks. It's wonderful. It is probably, it's ranked up there with one of my favorite Godzilla movies. And it is going to be up there in our lists of top movies for the year. It's definitely going to be up at the top towards the number 1, because it took me out of nowhere, and it's a human drama that just like we said earlier, that just happens to have a monster in it. And boy, is it a monster and everything. And there's scenes in Godzilla movies that, in this one, that we've never seen before. The scene where Godzilla was following the PT boat, and that was just amazing. And it was just, it didn't look CGI. It didn't look like a guy in a costume. It looked amazing. And whoever, did the special effects on this, truly, it's a true thumbs up. It might have been a guy staying up all night on his Mac trying to get all the effects done and everything. But you know what? Bravo to them. They did a great job on this. And I'm looking forward to seeing this again, because I went on my own, and Judy, now I've been raving about it for 2 days. And, I definitely want to take her to go see it too.
Yeah, absolutely. More people. Yeah. Anybody stay through the credits, or did everybody leave? Oh man. All right. I mean, there's no after credit scene. This is not a Marvel movie. This is not but I will say, stay through the credits, because you will be granted a little gift. First of all, I stayed through the credits anyway, even though usually I like to read the credits, but in this case, I don't read Japanese, so it was not really conducive to me to read the credits. But also just to sit back and listen to the Godzilla theme and the different Godzilla themes, because they incorporated, it's not just the 54 theme they incorporated in the movie, but as Drew pointed out, there's references to other Godzilla movies, other music in the suite that they had too. I instantly got the soundtrack. The soundtrack is phenomenal. And I will say, if you stay to the end, you just hit to hear one final, before it fades to black or whatever, before it ends, you're gifted with one last Godzilla roar, and it just is awe. I was just in awe. I mean, there's no way I could leave the theater not smiling after a Godzilla roar, which is something I would not say if he was real at all. So reason enough to go see it, especially on a good theater, like a really high quality super theater. So hopefully that'll be available for us. If not, then get your sound systems ready at home, because I'm sure this will be available. I do believe that Amazon Prime has said that I think will have the rights to show this at some point. So maybe next year. In the meantime, there's a lot of other Godzilla stuff to come, because we saw trailers and stuff from Monarch, but we'll talk about that next year, because I'm sure that'll be something that is on our radar. But thanks, guys. We really appreciate you guys joining us to talk about this Toho release. We're going to be right back, and we're going to close out the show.
Okay, YouTube folks, this is our bonus parts. And, I was thinking about it, and it's real interesting right now, but how much Godzilla we're getting right now, between the movie we just were talking about, but also Monarch. And it's just amazing. And then, of course, the trailer for Godzilla X Khan, and it looks great. This is just a great time to be a monster fan, the big, big monsters. And I'm loving it. And one of the things I was going to talk about has anyone in here been watching Monarch on
Yes.
Apple?
I've been watching and enjoying Monarch quite a bit.
It's been a ton of fun. And, I've always said, watching like Kong Skull Island and watching, Godzilla, King of the Monsters and stuff. Oh, I want to see more monsters. I want to see, more monster time. I don't want to deal with these people parts and everything. And Monarch is actually doing a really good job with the people. But every episode, you're at least getting one or two big monsters. And I'm loving the series and everything. And,
There's been
do you like
4 episodes so far, and I think
Yes.
we've gotten 2 cameos by Godzilla.
Yes.
So, and in other Titans as well. But
Yes.
yeah,
More.
two. So for Godzilla fans,
And I think they're
but
building towards something bigger even.
that is an interesting point, Mike, where like a lot of times, and even with this movie, the only criticism I heard was from some people that are just like, there's too many people and there's too much people and not enough Godzilla. And I'm like, well, that's the case a lot of times, right? Like certainly that's the case for the 2014 Legendary. I mean, that's a true case of like, get off the screen, show us the green guy. Like that just
8 minutes and 14 seconds of Godzilla only in the 2014.
Really?
Yeah.
That little?
And what's worse is that movie like teases him. Like throughout the movie, it teases him, and you're like, come on, like he's over here and our characters are going the other way, and the camera decides to follow the characters, and I'm like, no, let's go. It's just annoying.
But Troy San Francisco, come on.
But when you have a movie like this one,
Right.
that the people are interesting, as we've all said, we didn't even need Godzilla for this movie, but he's incorporated very well with the story, the use of him, and he takes on a different meaning. And it means so much more than just a thing that comes in and destroys crap, which always looks cool. Well, not always. 1998. But
98 you keep on referring
I know.
to,
I couldn't resist, but just to give it one last shot. But yeah, so but yeah, I think Monarch's doing a good job with the people. Kurt Russell's in it, so if anybody's a Kurt Russell fan like I am, and his son is in it, and it takes place over 2 different time periods, and it's the same character, and it's great to see them sort of work off each other in different time periods. But yeah, I think it's a good show.
Oh, very much so. It's a lot of fun, and I do recommend it for folks. But where I'm going with this is more of like a renaissance for the big green guy. And do you think, are they overkilling it, or is it too much? Or are you guys happy with everything that's coming out right now?
I
So
haven't seen everything, so
yeah, and neither have I. And so it's one of those things where streaming services, there's just so many of them out there. Apple TV, I'm going to wait until the series has run its course, and then I'm going to binge it in a single month period. I can't afford everything. What I think is kind of really cool about this Godzilla sans, if we can,
I like that. You should copyright that one.
I'm sure someone has beat me to it. Is that we're getting a lot of different voices with it. So you have the American stuff, you have the Japanese stuff that's coming out, and I think everyone who's mentioned the fact that Shin Godzilla is very much a dig at the Japanese government in response to that. That Godzilla is a callback to what made Godzilla great. There's Criterion copies of the '54 Godzilla, right? That's what we're getting from there. And in the United States, we're getting the spectacle, and the television show, we're getting a little bit more along those lines. It's not too much for me, because the great thing is, if I don't like what's coming out new, I have 70 years worth of Godzilla to watch. So I can pick and choose however I want. I think it's nice if there's a demand for it. And I think there is, I think, within fandom. And I think it's like I mentioned before with my younger brothers, every couple of years they would become reinvested in what Godzilla is. And I think there's going to be a lot of younger generations who are going to get a chance to watch Godzilla and come to it with programs like the Legendary or like Monarch, but then they'll also have access to Shin and -1. Brilliant. I mean, I wish I had those. I love my Showa era stuff, but to have access to that in all its kind of diversity. All we need now is another Saturday morning cartoon like we had as a child with a Godzuki, right? A little flying Godzilla with the little flaps under its arms. Maybe not. No, actually, what am I saying? We have that as well. Netflix has the animated Godzilla series that came out a couple of years ago, which are phenomenal, which take place far into the future, and the Godzilla gene has overrun the entire planet. And if you haven't seen those are amazing. The Gamera series, I know it's slight off the beaten path, but still kaiju. The Gamera series that just got dropped on Netflix is a kids on bikes adventure, set in a kaiju war-torn area. So yeah, if you want your big monsters, bring it, because we got them.
I was gonna ask you guys, because I had seen, in doing the research, that Toho with Shin Godzilla, that represented a new era of Toho's production of Godzilla, and they said that Godzilla -1 is actually the 4th movie in that era. And there's 3 animated movies which are on Netflix, as well as an animated series. As you mentioned, I have not seen any of the anime movies. I didn't know, what their connection was to anything, and if they were any good. I didn't even know that Toho actually was the one behind those 3 movies. But have you guys seen those? Are they worth it?
Oh, I'm going to be a bit of a negative Nelly. I did not care for the Netflix animated Godzilla series. It was set way too far in the future. And like Drew mentioned, the Godzilla had taken over the entire planet. And it just didn't connect with me. However, we will go back to that non-mentioned 98. There was an excellent Saturday morning cartoon series based in that universe, which they should have hired those writers for the movie version, as opposed to those writers picking up the pieces of that movie and making an excellent cartoon out of it. So I love the the renaissance that Mike and Drew brought up, that we are living in great times if you're a monster fan.
Oh, very much. So.
There's an old adage, which is getting blurred these days, that movies are plot driven and TV shows are character driven. So used to be that you would watch a movie for the plot, and like American TV shows like Gunsmoke, they could only compete against a big budget Western because it was character driven.
Mm-hmm.
Every week you learned just a little bit more about the character. Whereas in a movie, you had an hour and a half to learn everything you're going to need to know about a character. So, but
yeah,
with streaming and binge watching and all that's getting blurred these days. So we have Godzilla -1, which I would argue is character driven, and Monarch, which is also character driven. So, but I just saw the preview for Godzilla X Kong, and that looks very much plot driven.
Yeah,
I think you can.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can just cut out that one. You can cut the humans right out of that movie. And,
yeah, I'm sure they probably have actually. That looked like just a CGI slugfest.
Right.
It's pretty.
If you are a literary fan
Sure.
and you like reading about stuff, last year, or maybe actually no, it was this year. Godzilla: The Official Guide to the King of the Monsters was released. That it was an official publication by Toho, and it was co-written by film critic Graham Scripper, and it's an excellent guide. And it's the entire history and it's everything. So the little aspects, it's like those cartoons from the 90s or the 80s, the Netflix animated series, every aspect of Godzilla, the books, the comics, there's a whole living, breathing comics world. I mean, Godzilla Goes to Hell is just bonkers as all get out. So if this movie, Monarch and this movie and the legendary movies are sparking an interest in someone you know, and I'm saying this to our listeners or to our guests here, then it's certainly worth checking out, especially if you like learning more about this kind of subject. It's a purchase that I'm very happy with.
That's awesome. That is really, really awesome. Because there are quite a few books about Godzilla too, for people to check out. So it's just not, the movies and TV, folks. There's, and there's a wonderful song by Deep Purple, so it's okay.
He's not just the king of monsters. He's arguably one of the kings of media.
Yes, very much so.
Wasn't that Blue Oyster Cult?
Blue Oyster Cult, yes.
Oh, it was
exactly.
Blue Oyster Cult. I should be fired.
I don't have a lot to contribute to this conversation, but I do know that was Blue
That
Oyster
is
Cult.
Blue Oyster Cult. I know that too.
Covered by our good friends, the Possum Kingdom Ramblers, as well.
Exactly. He used to play it all the time for William. And he says, "Dad, play the Godzilla song."
I love the guys. Yeah, awesome.
Exactly. And and then he would just be humming all day after that. There goes Tokyo. So it's awesome. It's like I raised that kid right, so it's okay. All right, let's wrap up the show. So that's going to wrap up another episode of the Earth Station One podcast. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Alan, thanks for sleeping on the station this week. We did appreciate you.
Thank you. The beds are comfy. Catering's not so good, but the beds are comfy.
Well, we're working on the catering, and everything. Anything you want to shout out about, sir?
Yeah, actually, talking about growing up on Japanese TV, I don't know if folks are aware of this book, Rising Sun Reruns, which is a selection of essays from today's grown-up kids reflecting on growing up on Japanese TV shows. I have an essay in here about watching a Japanese TV show called The Water Margin, which was a badly dubbed BBC version of a Japanese show that I grew up on. But if you want to know about flying robots, Astro Boy, Battle of the Planets, Space Giants, and all that good stuff that you guys were talking about, this is a fun collection of essays on people's memories of growing up with those TV shows. It's called Rising Sun Reruns, and you can find it, a link to it from the books page on my website, alanjporter.com.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely looking into that because, I grew up with stuff like that, like Johnny Sacco. Then you also had Marine Boy, Speed Racer, Kimba the White Lion. You had all those type of things. It was just wonderful stuff. Thank you, sir. Drew, always great to have you.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me along. This is one of my favorite subjects to discuss. And if you want to hear me discuss more movies, I have a relatively new podcast called Never Say Die. It is a movie review and role-playing game podcast where we bring in a movie, discuss it, and then discuss how you can role play the kind of the spirit of the film, regardless of the system that you're using. Our first season was all kids on bikes. Second season is all heist films. And somehow we managed to talk about Godzilla and monster and kaiju films in almost all of our episodes. So that one's can be found wherever you find podcasts.
That's awesome that you're recording again, sir. That's awesome to hear.
Yeah,
absolutely. Now it's back to Cronenberg body horror for you.
Mm-hmm. And Mr. Mark.
The way to spend the holidays.
Mr. Mark, thank you so much as always.
Oh, thank you for having me as always.
Anything you want to promote or shout out about?
I am currently working on a screenplay for a completely computer animated movie, which I cannot quite divulge anything about. And I've also working on a new story for Dark Sister magazine, which you can find on Amazon if you wish. But my new story is not out yet.
Awesome. But look up Mark. He's everywhere.
I'm on Facebook. That's my jam. I'm there every day. So if you want to find me, I'm easy to find.
Mm-hmm. He's sitting there, talking. We'll talk to anybody. He talks to us, so he must be able to talk to anybody. So it's a good thing. And now that he got his microphone working, watch out, world. He's coming for you.
Now you can actually hear me when I talk.
Exactly. It's a perfect thing. And Mr. Mike Gordon, we've made it through another one, my friend.
We did. And as always, it's my pleasure.
Anything you want to shout out about or promote?
Yeah, I do. We had the Bobby had the original or the actual book launch this past weekend, although it's been available for a little while now. But I just wanted to give a shout out to our good friend Bobby Nash, Benny Books, his self-publishing company, which I help with edits. Came out with the newest, the 7th installment of the Abraham Snow series, which is Snow Hunt. So it's available now. It's these books just keep getting better and better. The action, this one is almost all action. It's a great sort of story about a thriller about trying to find an assassin who loves to plant bombs all over Atlanta. So it's a really good read, and if you're from the Atlanta area, you are very familiar with some of these sites. So this is, I think, one of the best series that Bobby's ever done. So, and he continues to get better and better with them. So they are available. They make great stock, even for the great stocking stuffers. So get some snow for Christmas.
Awesome. My shout out real quick is to the fine folks here at ESO Network. It's been a while since we've all gotten together, but we actually had a holiday party, and it's the first one we've done in over 4 years. And it was wonderful to be back with everybody. It was always an annual tradition ever since I started podcasting, is to get together with either my podcast host and such, or friends of the show. And then as the network grew, we started having a yearly holiday party. And up until COVID, we got together with, everyone who was local to Atlanta. But then we even had folks who came in from Tennessee, from Alabama, from Florida. If they could get to us, they came in for the party. And this was the first time we've been able to get together, and that I felt comfortable enough after COVID to be able to be in a crowd like this. And it was wonderful. It was magical. It was a great time to join together and see people we haven't been in the same room with for quite some time, and to celebrate the season, to celebrate ESO, to talk about memories and, all this kind of stuff. And for me, it was just a really, really special time. And we've got a lot coming this next year that, we'll be in touch with, and you guys will be along for the ride, that, we're gonna, be able to celebrate all together and for a lot of things. So, it's just this time of the year, it's always nice to reflect and remember, but also be thankful for what you have and to all those who are around you. So it was just really nice. And I also want to give a shout out to the fine folks at Bambinelli's in Tucker, Georgia.
Yum,
They
yum.
were amazing. They have, some amazing Italian food, and they have a couple different locations around Atlanta. And so if you get a chance, check them out. And they didn't even pay for advertising, and we ended up paying them. So, it was still that good that I'm willing to give them a shout out. So you can check them at bambinellis.com or Yelp or, Google and such. I definitely would highly recommend it. Thanks for listening to the Earth Station One podcast. Always remember, we couldn't do this without you. If you want to support the podcast, please check out our Tee-Public store and check out some cool ESO Network swag. And right now, the whole store is 35% off. So, folks, if you've been wanting to get some Earth Station One stuff, any ESO Network show stuff, there's some pretty cool things up there, and 35% off the regular prices. It's pretty decent, and their prices aren't that high anyway. So, I know I'm going to be getting some ESO Network stickers and some other things that, some new t-shirts and such. And we have new designs coming. So, you know what? There's always new stuff popping up. And even if you go through our link and you see other designs other than, what we designed, you can actually purchase those through the store, and we still get a little, credit for it. So definitely check it out. You can find the link on top of the Earth Station One podcast website or ESO Network website. So definitely check it out. Also, if you want to help support us, please, become a patron of the ESO Network for only as little as $1 a month. You too can help support the ESO Network. And we want to give a huge shout out to our patrons. You've been with us through thick and thin. And you know what? We do appreciate you guys more than you could ever expect. Thank you, as always, to those patrons. You too can join them. Just go to patreon.com/ESO Network. We want to hear from you, so please write us anytime you want. Please write us at feedback@earthstation1.com. We definitely would love to hear from you. Remember, you could also find Earth Station One wherever fine podcasts are found. And now Earth Station One has these wonderful sunny faces up on video. So you know what, folks? You could see us on YouTube, and you could throw things at us and, yell at us back and say, that's not what Godzilla was about. No, of course.
You can see my Godzilla guy.
Exactly. Right up there. You could see it. Zooming over Mike Gordon.
He's looming.
Exactly. Pretty awesome. So you definitely check it out. Definitely check us up on YouTube. And if you get a chance, like and subscribe. You made it this far into the video. You must like us somewhat, or something. So please like and subscribe. Okay, folks, that's the show for tonight. On behalf of myself, Mike Faber, Mr. Michael Gordon, Alan J. Porter, Drew Meyer, and Mr. Mark Holmes, thank you for joining us on Earth Station One. We'll see you here next week. Take it easy, everyone. Have a great week, and we are done. Boom. Bye.
You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.